Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. In this session, I am going to explain or to discuss what is control structure in programming languages. So, when we say control structure in computer programming is a block of codes that determines the flow of execution based on a certain condition or criteria. Control structures are fundamentals for creating logic. So when we say creating logic, so they are allow you to determine the logic flow of your program, specifying how different parts of the code should be executed based on the conditions. So decision making, making decisions. So in making decisions, they are able to providing a construct like if statement or condition statements that allow the program to take a different paths depending on whatever the condition is true or false, and controlling the order in which instructions are executed within the program. So it means they control the order in which instructions or statements are executed within the program. So this is crucial for ensuring that the program behaves as unintended and accomplish its tasks in the correct sequence. So it means that the function of the control structure are very essential. This is very essential tools in programming that allows the developer or the user to create a dynamic, flexible, and responsible code by introducing a decision-making capabilities and controlling the flow of the execution based on specific conditions. So this is very crucial for building complex and functional software applications. So in the control structure, they have a selection statements, the two-way selection, the nesting selection, the multiple selection statement, the iterative statements, the counter-controlled loop, the logical controlled loop, and the unconditional branching, and the guarded command. So, in the selection statement, this selection statement is also known as a decision making or conditional statements. There are control structure in programming that allows you to execute a different block of codes based on a certain condition or a criteria. So these decision making or conditional statements are specific types of control structure. They allow the program to make a decision based on a certain conditions or a criteria. In other words, they are able to program or to choose between the different path or action depending on whether specific conditions are true or false. So this control structure are the elements in program that dictates the flow of the execution. So they are the one who dictates the flow of the execution. So in the selection statements, I have here an example code which is using Python programming language. So an if conditions number code to be executed in the condition is true. So in if condition, so if the statement if statement is a control flow statement that allow you to execute a block of code only in a certain condition if it is true. So the if keyword, this if keyword introduce the conditional statement. So it is a placeholder of the actual condition that you want to check, an expression that evaluates to either true or a false. So the if conditions, the code to be executed if the condition is true, and the else, the code to be executed if the condition is false. In the if condition, there will be the starting point of the decision-making process. So it means the decision-making process will start in the if conditions. The conditions is a logical expression that evaluates to either true or a false. If the condition is true, the code inside the following blocks will be executed. So this is the block of code that will run if the condition is specified in the if statement of true. So it contains the instruction or action that should be taken when the condition is satisfied. So in the else, if the condition in the if statement is false, then the program will skip the code. The program will skip the code inside the if block, and then it moved to the else, and then the else keyword introduced an alternative block of code to be executed in case the condition is false. So this type of construction is used to make a decision in a program based on the evaluation of multiple conditions, uh, wherein the if condition 1 and the else condition 2. So the else stands for else if. So in the the if condition 1 is true, then the code block is intended below the line will be executed. So if the condition 1 is false, then the program will move on to the next condition. So in the else condition 2, if the else condition 2 is false, the program will move on to the next block. It's either another else or the else block if there is no more else condition. So in the else, so if one will provide, if none of the previous condition or condition 1 and condition 2 is true, and the block intended below the else line will be executed. This block is like a default of or catch-all option for case where one of the preceding condition is met. So that is the example of the sleep code when you are using a selection statements. So next is the two-way selection. This two-way selection is also known as a binary decision or a simple decision. It's a type of control structure that involves making a choice between two alternative paths based on a condition in programming. This is typically implemented using an if statement. Here is how a two-way selection works. So this concept is a type of condition structure used in programming to make a decision based on a certain conditions. The key idea is that the program evaluates a condition and depending on whether the condition is true or false, and it takes one of two possible paths. So here are the breakdowns of the two selection work typically implemented using the if statements. So in condition 1 evaluations, the program check a specific condition to determine whether it's true or false. The condition is usually logical expression that involves a variables, constant, or other elements. So in the other alternative paths, based on the result of the condition evaluation, the program has two alternative paths uh, or branches that it can follow, which is the true or the false path. When we say true path, if the condition is true, then the program execute to the set of statement of the code block associated with the true branch or of the if statement. So when we say false path, if the condition is false, then the program skip the true branch and execute the set of statement or code block associated with the false branch. Here, here are the codes in the two-way selection. This is the sample code for the two-way for the two-way selection. This is the sample code for the two-way selection. So the two-way selection using if-else statement. So else x is equal to 10, then this line initialize the variable x within the value of 10. Then if x is greater than 5, then this is an if statement that check whether the value of x is greater than 5. So the print in else print, this is the x is greater than 5. So if the condition in the if statement is true, then this will be executed and it will print a message x is greater than 5 to the console. So else if the condition in the if statement is false, the code in the else block will be executed. Then print if the condition in the if statement is false, then this line will be executed and will print the message x is not greater than 5 to the console. In this specific case, since x is 10, then which is greater than 5, then the if block will be executed in the output that will be x is greater. Next is the nesting selection. So this nesting selection is also known as nested selection or multiple level selection. It's a programming concept where you place one selection structure such as if statement inside another. So this allow for more complex decision making based on multiple conditions. You can have multiple levels of nested selection structure to handle a various scenario. So, when we say nesting selection, it is describing a multiple level selection in a programming. So, this selection structure in programming is typically an if statement or a similar construct that allows the program to make decision based on a certain conditions. So the nested selections occurs when you place one selection structure inside another. In other words, you have an if statement within another if statement. So the purpose of nested selection is to enable more complex decision making in a program by having a multiple level of nested selection structure. So you can consider and evaluate multiple conditions in a hierarchical manner. So within the nested selection, you can address a different scenarios. By checking a multiple conditions at a different levels. So each level of the nested structure can handle a specific conditions or set of conditions, allowing for a more sophisticated decision making process. So that is nested selection. So in here in the snip code, using a Python programming language, so x is equals to 0 and y is equal to 5. Sorry. X is equal to 10, then y is equal to 5. Nag-initialize lang siya into two variables. So, if the first if statement check if x is greater than 5, then if it's true, if print x is greater than 5 and enters the nested block. So, inside the nested block are another if statement that checks if y is greater than 2, and if true, it prints y is also greater than 2. Then if it is false, it prints y is not greater than 2. So, in the initial condition in step 2 is false, it moves to the else block and print x is not greater than 5. So this way, the code are correctly handled the condition, the code are directly handled the conditions and print the appropriate message based on. Next is the multiple selection statement. So multiple selection statements often referred to as a switch statement in a language that support it. It allows you to choose one of a several code blocks to execute based on the value of a given expression or variables. It's a way to streamline the decision making process when there are multiple possible outcomes. Not all programming language support switch statement, but where they do, they are a more concise and efficient alternative to a series of nested if-else statement. So this explains that in the control flow of this that exists in some programming languages, and it serves as a more concise and efficient way to make a decision based on the value of a particular expression or variables. The purpose of this, it means that the switch statement is designed to simplify the decision making in a situation where a multiple possible outcomes based on the value of a specific expression or a variables. So with the use of this language, in this language, it support the switch statement. So you can use it to choose one code block to execute one several possible blocks. This decision is made based on the value of the given expression or a variable. So this switch statement is more concise, more concise, and efficient alternative to using a series of nested if-else statements. While if-else statement can also handle a multiple conditions, they may become cumbersome and harder to read as the number of condition increase. So the switch statement is seems as a clearer and more structured a way to handle such a scenario. So it means that the switch statement is a kind of programming features that enhance the readability and maintainability of the code by providing an expression or variables which is particular or useful when there are numerous conditions to consider, offering a more organized and efficient alternative to. In this example or in the snip code for this the snip code for the multiple selection statement, that in this example you initialize a variable x within the value of 10. So the if statement checks whether x is greater than 10, x is greater than 10, or if the condition is true, uh, it prints the x is greater than 10. It prints the x is greater than 10. Then the else, or short for the else f, the statement check whether the x is greater than uh, x is greater than x is equal sorry. This statement check if x is equal to 10 and then equal to 10. And if the first condition is false, but this one is true, then it prints x is equal to 10. So if both the above conditions are false, the else statement execute X is, in this specific case, since X is equal to 10, the second condition, else X equals to 10, will be true, and the corresponding message, X is equal to 10, will be printed in this sample. Next is the iterative statements. So iterative statement refers to as loops or iteration structures, are control structures in programming that allow you to repeatedly execute a block of codes as long as a certain condition is met. Loops are essential for performing tasks that requires repetitive actions, such as processing arrays, lists, or collections of data. So, this statement is describing the concept of loops or iterations structure in a programming. There are construct in programming that enable the repetition of a block of codes. So the primary purpose of the loop is to repeatedly execute a specific set of instructions or a block of codes. So this repetition continues as long as a certain condition is met, and this condition is usually specific in the loop control statement. So these loops are crucial when you need to perform tasks that involves repetitive actions. Example, it includes processing array lists and the actions of the data. Loops are very sequential employed in scenarios where you want to perform the same set of operation on a multiple elements within the structure. In summary, that these loops will provide a way of automate repetitive tasks by allowing the execution of a block codes of multiple times based on a specific condition. So this is particularly useful for handling and manipulating data in array, lists, or in other collections of in the sample program uh, using the iterative statements. In the while loop is used to a repeated execution of a block of codes as long as it gives a condition is true. So in this example, the loop will continue to execute as long as the condition count lesser than 5 is true, and then the count value is incremented in each iteration, providing an infinite loop. So for loop 2 is used to iterate over a sequence such as the list, the tuple, string, or range, and execute a block of code for each statement. So the loop is iterated over the value of 0 and 4. And then the range is 5. So in each iteration, the block of code inside the loop is executed within the current value of I. So to do the while loop is similar to a while loop, but the condition is checked after the execution of a loop body. In languages that support it, the loop body is guaranteed to execute a last once. In this example, the loop will execute the last once in the condition check comes after the loop body. So for the break statement is used to exit the loop when the desired condition is met. So in summary of this program, while loop continues to execute a block of the code while given condition is true. For the for loop here in for loop, iterates over a sequence of the values and execute a block of codes for each value, while the do while loop executes a block of code at class once, then check a conditions to determine if the loop should continue. So always remember when you are doing this that the specific syntax and usage might be vary slightly depending on the programming language. Next is the counter control loop. Counter control loop is a type of loop in a computer programming that iterates a specific number of time based on the value of a counter variables. Counter-controlled loops are often implemented using a for loop, but they can also be achieved using a while loop with a counter variables that is incremented or decremented in each iteration. These loops are particularly useful when you know in advance how many times you want to repeat a certain block of codes. So, a counter-controlled loop is a type of loop that repeats a specific number of time based on the value of a counter variation. For the implementation of this, these loops are commonly implemented using for loop, while is a programming construct a specific designed for iterating iterating a specific number of times. However, it is also possible to achieve counter-controlled loop using a while loop, where a counter variables is manually incremented or decremented in each iteration. When we say counter variable, the loop relies on a counter variables, which is a variable that keep track of the number of the iteration. This variable is typically initialized before the loop start, and it is modified within the loop body. So the usefulness of these counter control loops are especially useful when you know in advance how many times you want to repeat a certain block of codes. So this knowledge allows you to set up the loop to run exactly the desired number of the iteration. In summary, the counter-controlled loop is provide the way to repeat a block of a code a specific number of time by using a counter variables to be controlled in the iteration. So they are offer a structure and predictable approach by looping and making them particularly handy when the number of the iteration is known in advance. So for the sample code in this uh, counter controlled loop, so I have here prepared using a Python programming language. So for I n for the I if for I n range 5, the counter controlled looping using a for loop for I in range 5. So this line set up a loop that iterates over the values from 0 to 4. So 5 is excluded. So assigning each value to the variable of I in each iteration. So if print iteration I, this line will print a message to the console during each iteration of the loop. Then the F before the string indicates that it's formatted string allow you to embed the value of the variables within I, and then within the strings, within a variable I within the strings. So it will print a message like iteration 0, and then and so on up to the iteration 4. That is how this counter control loop take place in a program. So next is the logically controlled loop. So the logically controlled loop is also known as a conditional controlled loop, a typical type of loop of computer programming where the continuation of the loop is determined by a logical condition. The loop will continue to execute as long as the specified condition remains true. Logically controlled loops are typically implemented using while loop, and they are useful when you don't know in advance how many times the loop need to execute. So here is the sample program for the logically controlled loop. So count 0 is count is equals to 0. Count is equals to 0. This line initialize a variable name count, and set its value to 0. So this variable will be used to keep track of the number of iteration in the loop. So while count is lesser than 5, this line start a loop that continues to execute the intended block of codes below. It has also as the condition count of lesser than 5 is true. In other words, the loop will run as long as the value of the count is less than 5. So in the print iteration, in the print uh, if iteration count here, inside of this loop, there is an intended block of code with is single statement. So this statement use the print, and then function is to display a message to the console that the message include the current value of count within the string. So it will print some like iteration 0, iteration 1, and so on. So count positive is equals to 1. This line is increment the value of the count. This line is increment the value uh, of the count by 1 in each iteration of the loop. It is important to update the value of count within the loop to eventually meet the exit condition count 5, count lesser than 5, and prevent the infinite loop. So when you run this code, you will print a message iteration 0 through the iteration 4. The console of the loop iterates 5 times from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there will be an exit because the condition count is lesser than 5 becomes false. So that is the process or the coding when you are using the this logical controlled loop. So that is the snip code for the uh, logical controlled loop. So next is the unconditional branching. So the unconditional branching is a control flow mechanisms in computer programming that allows a program to jump from one section of code to another without any conditions. Without any conditions. And then or restriction. It typically involves using a control statement or instruction that direct the program to move to a specific location in the code unconditionally. One of the most common forms of the unconditional branching is the goto statement, which is supported in many programming languages. The goto statement, also known as a programmer, to specify a level or a line of code which is program's execution will jump regardless of any conditions. So this fundamental characteristic of this loop is uh, it means that this regardless to the current state of any logical conditions in the program will always move to a specific location in the code. So in the common tools used for unconditional branching is the goto statement. The goto statements is allow programmer to specify the level line of codes, and then also to which the program executed will jump, uh, irrespective of any conditions that might be presented in the program. And, in other words, the program will transfer control to the designated location unconditionally. So it worth nothing that the use of the goto statement has been discouraged in the modern programming practice because it can lead to code that is hard to understand and maintain. So the structured programming, which encourage the use of the structure control flow, construct like a loop and conditional statement, if often preferred for its readability and maintainability. Many programming languages provides alternative way to achieve the desired control flow without relying on the unconditional branching. So here is the sample code for the unconditional branching. So in this example, if the user enters a negative number, the program will print the number is negative and then jump to the label and program. Using the goto statement, if the user enters a non-negative number, the program will will print the number of non-negative and proceed to the label of end program. So we should always remember that the use of goto is generally discouraged, and structured control flow statement should be prepared for a better code readability and maintainability. For example, uh, in is just for illusion or purpose to explain the concept of unconditional branching. So this is just a sample snip code for the unconditional branching. So if number is lesser than 0, then print the number is negative. The goto ends the program. So the unconditional jump to the end of the program will print the number is non-negative. It will end the program, then print end of the program. So that is how the program in the unconditional branching. So next is the guarded. For the guarded command is a concept in a computer science and programming that relates to a concurrent or parallel programming and synchronizations. So these guarded commands, it's emphasized the use of guarded commands where actions are associated with a guard conditions. So these conditions dictates when a command can execute, and if not met the command, and if not met, the command remain inactive or black until the condition is fulfilled. So this concept is very crucial for managing shared resources and ensuring the smooth collaboration among the multiple process of a trend. So here is the sample code or the snip code for this uh, guard, guarded command. So this code is represent the basic condition statement. If a certain condition or if condition is true, then the specific command will be executed. If the condition is not true, then the alternative command will be executed instead. And that is the end indicates that is the end of the process for the unconditional statement, inclusion of the unconditional statement. So that's it for my topic. So that's all for the control structure. Hope you will understand the uh hope you will get an idea about the control structure in programming languages. So that's all for today.